Uh, okay, everybody, welcome to the James Prince channel. I'm here with the esteemed guest of mine, my brother Deuce Prince. Deuce is the host of Defer to the Game and also the 434 Defense podcast, where he talks about UVA football and just the college football landscape as a whole. Deuce, how we feeling today?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm ready to get on the carousel.
We have a special episode today. We're going to talk about something that both of us have a very interesting perspective on growing up in the coaching business, and that is the coaching carousel. I can't believe it's already week 9 of college football,
Oh
and
my goodness.
this is arguably probably the biggest coaching hiring season that we've seen in college football for a very long time. A lot of big name schools, a lot of schools that will have domino effects that will ripple down into some of the smaller programs into Power Four and Group of Five. Deuce, kind of tell us about, your thoughts about this and kind of what it means to be a part of the coaching carousel.
It's funny because as a coach's kid, some coaches' kids that I've talked to do get involved in knowing stuff before it happens. I think our dad made a very smart decision to not clue us in on things before it was publicly available. And, now that, our dad's out of the industry, we heard about all sorts of potentialities that could have occurred that all of a sudden changed at the 12th hour because this is never a straightforward process. I do think one of the biggest differentiating factors this year in terms of these job openings is who wants to win and who's trying to build a program. Because I think each school that has an opening at the FBS level right now wants either one of them, but not necessarily just both. I think schools are looking for one or the other right now.
I think, kind of when most families, when kids get older in life and they have a different relationship with their parents, usually the lore that you learn about with your family is like, oh, your fifth uncle, your second cousin twice removed was on the lam for 18 days back in 74. With coaches' kids, it's like, oh, I was offered this job, back in, so and so year, and you're like, dang, that could have changed a whole trajectory of our lives. So
Life looks completely differently.
absolutely. So we're going to talk about our 10 most interesting jobs right now in the Power Four, and then we have one or two Group of Five schools that we're going to discuss about. I would be remiss to say, I asked Deuce to compile a list for each team of who he thought would, in terms of realistically, which school is going to get the guy, and also just in terms of who would make the best fit. I can only speak for my list. I think every school, in terms of the top 5 schools, in my opinion, that is LSU, Penn State, Florida, Virginia Tech, and Arkansas. I think all three of them call Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, and John Gruden, and I think all three will say no. Deuce, do you, before we get into it, just say yes or no? Do any of those three coaches are they on your list going into this?
None of those three coaches are on my list.
Okay.
I don't have any of them. I have a sneaking suspicion that for whatever reason, someday John Gruden is going to take USF as his retirement job. I think that is the job he is made for. I think that would be his great Bill Belichick job, and I think he'd do a hell of a lot better than Belichick is currently doing in
There we
North
go.
Carolina with it at USF. He's a Tampa guy. And that comes into play later on this list, people being
Okay.
Tampa guys.
Oh, so let's dive into it. Deuce, do you want to talk about the biggest job on this list, or do you want to kind of start work our way up from some of the smaller schools that we have on our list?
I'll start from the bottom up
Okay.
because
Let's
I think that's where we can kind of get some stuff out of the way. At number 12, I have Kent State. Unfortunately, Kent State's just in a really tough spot right now. Obviously, their head coach, who was seemingly trying to do a very good job there, got caught up in some scandal and had to get let go, and that program is just kind of in a tough spot right now. Number 11, I really wanted to rank this job higher, UAB.
mm,
UAB has done a great job with their program outside of Coach Dilfer. quarterback Trent Dilfer. They've got a great stadium in downtown Birmingham. They've got a really good setup, and unfortunately, the biggest things that have happened are A, they shut their program down because Bear Bryant's family did not want Birmingham to compete with Tuscaloosa, and B, they hired Trent Dilfer, who set that program back a couple years. But they're in the American, they're in a great recruiting area. Number 10, Oregon State.
Okay.
This is a job that's kind of in a tough spot right now. They had a chosen son there and had to let him go under kind of dubious circumstances. It just didn't seem like things are going well over there, but they are plugged in with California JUCOs, and you can always win games like that.
Okay. So I'll start. I did not have a coach for Kent State. I did have a coach for UAB, and that was Anthony Belvins, the assistant special teams coordinator for the Chicago
Ooh.
Bears. Anthony Belvins played at UAB. He also played in the two Arena Football League teams that were in Birmingham.
Ooh.
He also went back in the mid 2000s and 2010s, coached at UAB, and then has kind of like in the last 10 years, he was actually part of the team and I believe it was 20, 14 or 15. I'll get that number corrected, but he's been in the NFL for at least the past 8 or 9 years. But I do think UAB would be really nice to get kind of the taste of Trent Dilford out of everyone's mind and get somebody who obviously loves the city, loves the program, and I think that would be a really cool fit. But um, Deuce, did you have anybody that was a part of the UAB search? If not, we'll go into the Oregon State one.
So I'm gonna get my Kent State pick out of the way because I think this is a
Okay,
pick
good.
that is just so bizarre but for whatever reason I could see it happening. Steve Belichick.
Okay.
I think Steve
Okay.
Belichick is getting ready for a head coaching, wants to get a head coaching job somewhere, and I think Kent State would want the publicity of having that there, and I think that would just be what it is. For
Okay.
UAB, this is not. I don't think it's a realistic hire because I think this coach is going to settle off into retirement and live an awesome rest of his coaching days, probably coaching high school ball or volunteering somewhere. I have Sam Pittman.
Hmm.
I would love to see Sam Pittman at UAB, a good coach like Sam Pittman, who obviously wasn't able to string together like people at Arkansas would have liked. I think Sam Pittman's a hell of a coach. Coaches the trench as well. That's how you win at the group of five level. I would love Sam Pittman at UAB.
Very nice. I like that pick. Okay. So Oregon State, Deuce, let's start with you. Who do you have that will bring the Beavers back? Obviously, they're kind of in this weird limbo of being one of the Pac-12 schools that got left out of the Big Ten and the ACC. It's a they're in a very precarious situation. Obviously, they're going to have new conference opponents coming up here in the next few years, and it's kind of more of like a reorganized Pac-12 with some of the bigger Mountain West and some of those other WAC schools coming up. Who do you see that can kind of lead this program?
So I have a coach who has California recruiting experience, national title experience, and a certain amount of name cachet, who has publicly expressed that he's not close to taking this job.
Oh,
Ed Orgeron to Oregon State. I
okay.
want to see this so badly. He said he is semi interested. He wants to hear the offer. I think if Oregon State threw the bag of money that they have at Ed Orgeron, I think Orgeron would do a hell of a job there. Obviously connected to California and the California junior colleges. Ed Orgeron recruited out there when he was at USC. I think he would do a great job at Oregon State.
Man, that is an incredible pick. I actually thought about Ed Ordron a lot for a lot of other schools on our list that we have here. I unfortunately think that he's maybe a couple, maybe more years away from finding another job that he would like. The name that I had on my list is the current San Jose State head coach, former Navy head coach Ken uh, Neomalota. Sorry, Neomatalota Lo. Sorry, because he's at the terrible pronunciation of the
Kenny
last
N.
name. But Coach Ken got to experience him firsthand when I was at the University of Delaware my senior year when we played them at Navy. That was I believe, his last year at Navy there. But he did a great job running the Naval Academy, and he's done a really good job with San Jose State. I think that could be a really interesting pick in terms of someone that's unique to the program and could bring a new, fresh identity to Oregon State. Obviously, when you're in state rival, like Oregon is known for just being able to, run up the score offensively and have this high-powered offense. I think it'd be a unique thing. Oregon State could be like, you know what, we're gonna have more traditional, maybe not full triple option playbook and identity, but our identity is going to be running the ball. And
Yes.
I think that could be a really sound pick for Oregon State. Although I think if they were able to get Ed Orgeron, I think that would be out of the park
I
pick.
think you make him say no.
Right. So that's a great pick. Up next for me, I think we go to the Oklahoma State job in
Okay.
Stillwater. Obviously, Mike Gundy, longtime head coach, player there as well. You know, I'm a grown man. I'm 40. Uh,
Shout out.
the man has one obviously as the new age of college football has come through. It's very clear that there have been guys like him who are very good coaches and know how to develop high school players.
hmm
But maybe, he just kind of realizes that this new age of NIL and rotating, 30, 40 players in the portal every year isn't just what he wants to do. And I think
Yeah.
that kind of just became abundantly clear the last few years. I have a name, and as an Atlanta Falcons fan, I could not be more happy if this happens, and that is Zach Robinson,
Oh.
offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. He was a quarterback there for at Oklahoma State. I don't know at this point in terms, from a coaching perspective, you hear a lot of backlash from fans when you're going to the office, listening to the radio, or they have the TV in their practice facilities. At this point, I can talk about the Falcons for 4 hours and ad nauseum, but at this point, if the season goes the way it's looking like it's going for Atlanta, I think he should just take this job, Oklahoma State, go back home where he will be loved and appreciated and not vilified and, tarred and feathered like he is currently being in Atlanta right now. I would have Zach Robinson as the next head coach for Oklahoma State. Deuce, who do you have?
Okay, so you have this as the ninth best job, right?
Correct.
I actually have this as the sixth. I actually think this is not as bad of a job as some people think. And you went program. Zach Robinson would build a program there. I went for the people at Oklahoma State, the people at Eskimo Joe's being tired of losing and they want to win. And they would go with a former Atlanta Falcons coach, the man himself, motorcycle Bobby Petrino, to be their head coach.
Okay.
He is doing a better job than I think a lot of people would have thought with his interim status at Arkansas. And I think the people at Oklahoma State have seen a couple losing seasons. They are not excited about it. They like to score points in Stillwater. They like to have a fun, exciting offense. And I think Bobby Petrino might end up getting that job at Oklahoma State.
Well, that is a pretty good segue into who I had next for the Arkansas job. And now, right now, as I'm talking about it, the top four schools I have clearly defined. The rest of the schools I'm kind of mishmashing them in no particular order here. But if we were to talk about what is happening at Arkansas, I believe it was T-Bob from Barstool Sports was talking about this a month ago. The Game of Thrones style manipulation that Bobby Petrino has done at Arkansas has led me to believe that if they finish out the season, sub 500 or above, they're giving him the job. And I think he wants the job, and I think he would stay at Arkansas. Now, that's only contingent on
That
if they
wouldn't
have
shock me. That wouldn't shock me.
I think it would divide the fan base in Arkansas even more, in the state of Arkansas even more. But I think like he would say yes. And I think the school and the administration could be like, here you go. Like we'll just give it to you. We're focusing on Coach K with basketball. Um, if that does not work, I had the University of South Florida head coach, Alex Galesh. I'm sure he's probably up on your list here soon. He's done an incredible job at South Florida, especially this year with just how successful. Obviously, they, have done really well in Group of Five and then, had a decent game against Miami earlier this year. I think he's a talented head coach. So if Bobby
Yes.
Petrino goes to Oklahoma State or they don't finish well, I could see someone like him going up and wanting to make that move into the SEC at a place like Arkansas. So who do you have as your Arkansas head coach?
So I have a two-way tie between two former Tulane coaches.
Mm,
I'm going to give the tie to John Summerall.
okay.
I think Arkansas wants a program. I think they liked the parts of building a program that Sam Pittman brought them winning in the trenches. Sam Pittman kept them competitive. I think Arkansas is a job where they want to get to that 10-win threshold. I think they want to start to compete again. I also am going to keep a reserved eye out for Willie Fritz.
Oh,
Willie Fritz obviously did a great job at Tulane, is building great things at Houston. I think being connected in that Southwest Conference network, East Texas into Louisiana, Arkansas, I think that Willie Fritz is also a name that we should keep an eye out for. The main reason I don't say that Willie Fritz is 100% the guy is I think the ceiling at group of five jobs like Houston, or not even group of five jobs, at
Big
a
12.
former
Yeah.
group of five job like
Yeah.
Houston, the ceiling is so much higher. There's not a huge difference between what Texas Tech has done and what Houston could do.
Right.
So I would say John Summerall. I think because in state certain programs would not like the politics of trying to grab the coach from Tulane. So I think Arkansas would do very well to give John Summerall all the Walmart money and give him the chance to go out and compete and succeed in the SEC.
It's so it's like, and it's kind of funny you brought that up with Coach Fritz. Like, in terms of a head coach who is at, let's say, like an ACC school or a Big 12 school, and you're looking at maybe a lower tier Big 10 school or a lower tier SEC school, you almost have to wonder, you have to balance so much in terms of like, okay, I could have a lot of success at a higher level ACC school. I can get, 9 or 8 wins, go to a good bowl game. But if I maybe do that in the SEC, there's no guarantee that I even scratch 7 games. And my four of my wins come from out of conference, or 3 of my games come from out of conference.
Alex Golish has a better shot at making the playoff at USF than he does at Kentucky.
Right. Exactly.
That's just the reality.
Exactly. So it's something that players have, the coaches have to understand is like, okay, like if I'm taking on this job where if I'm in the Big Ten or the SEC, where it's just so competitive at the top to one, get into that conference championship, and two, to make the playoffs just to have enough conference wins.
Yes.
Am I gonna have the backing of the boosters, the NIL, the fundraising to have the money to put to get the best players in the portal in high school and all those things? So that
Yeah.
is definitely a question that I kind of was pondering as I was looking through the rest of my schools here. So next school that I have on the list to talk about is Stanford.
Okay.
Stanford is such a unique school in terms of, obviously we all know obviously about the educational prowess and just the fact of who's running the Stanford program right now, and a young guy like Andrew Luck. Obviously Andrew, extremely smart guy. Although he may lead you to believe that he's not on social media, I think you'd be foolish to believe if he doesn't have people who eyes or ears are in the social media landscape to tell him what's going
Yep.
on in this world. And you would be mistaken if he's not watching film of all the other programs and all the other candidates that he's looking at. Obviously, Frank Wright,
Yes.
with the announcement of him leaving at the end of the season, leaves the question of who's going to take this next job. Deuce, I have a name that I think is not being talked about so much just because of the recent fallout that he's had in the past year and a half. But when you look at his last coaching job and where he was at, I think it just makes too much
I
sense.
know where you're going with this, and
And
this was almost my pick.
that's Pat Fitzgerald. Obviously, he had the huge contract, the settlement with Northwestern University over his contract. He's been out of coaching for now over a year. I think someone like him, who may people are not thinking is on the top of the coaching carousel list, I think that's someone that Andrew Luck would want to look for in terms of trying to run around and chase, 10 to 15 coaches who are being persuaded by SEC or Big Ten schools. Because then, what can Stanford offer at that point versus someone who maybe is looking to get back into coaching and knows how to recruit people at a high educational program. So,
Yes.
Deuce, tell me, who would you want and who do you see as the next head coach at Stanford?
Well, first off, I gotta say that Pat Fitzgerald would be the correct hire for Stanford.
Okay.
Plays a tough physical brand of football. That's what Stanford has done when they're successful. They're smart, they're physical at the point of attack. That's everything that Pat Fitzgerald represented. I do think politically it will be a tough sell considering the circumstances of his exit at Northwestern compared to Troy Taylor's exit at Stanford. And so I'm going to go with a coach who also plays a tough physical brand of football that had tremendous success at a school that was hard to recruit to and can recruit the West Coast very well. And that's who you had for the Oregon State job, Kenny Nui Matalolo. He plays a tough run-based offense that is very good at the point of attack. Obviously, great connections to the West Coast in recruiting, has coached at a lot of high character institutions, and I think that would make the people at Stanford very happy that they have a guy like that. He's right over at San Jose State, and he's building a pretty good program over there. We've seen San Jose State and Stanford have a fair amount of staff exchange all the way going back to the days of Bill Walsh.
Mm,
So I think Kenny N would be a great hire for Stanford if the Stanford hierarchy says no to Pat Fitzgerald under the circumstances.
I like that pick as well. That's a good one. Up next, we are going. This is the last pick I have before the top four. So if I missed one, let me know. Up next, we have UCLA.
Okay.
So in terms of UCLA, obviously, Tim Skipper, former player at UCLA, fired after losing to UNLV, New Mexico, and Utah. Uh, those are no group of five teams to scoff at, but at the end of the day, if you're part of the Big Ten and you're playing and you're a national brand like UCLA, you can't lose those type of games, especially so early into the season when, like we were talking about earlier, every game in conference you can't take for granted because it is going to be a dogfight. So
Yeah.
I think it has to be someone who A has to bring a lot of notoriety, a lot of publicity, lots of fame, and a lot of eyeballs on the program, or B has to be someone that is a tried and true program builder. And although those things aren't mutually exclusive, I do think it's important that you distinguish a lot of the coaches on who their identity is. So, for example, like no discredit to John Gruden, but I think he would fall into the category of category A in terms of just getting eyeballs on the program.
Yeah.
I think he would do a great job there as someone I was contemplating being a part of the Bruins, but I just don't see at this point if he would want to take on that job of trying to, start the program back up where it is. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of people have talked about Rosenthal and the interim head coach that they have going on right now with the success that they've had with beating Penn State and Maryland and the good games that they've had. I personally think that they're going to try to wipe the slate clean. And the person
Mhm.
I have is the current Utah State head coach, and that is Bronco Mendenhall.
Now, as a Virginia fan, I can endorse Bronco Mendenhall getting a big job. I definitely think that would be a great hire. Bronco's obviously a very good coach. He did a great job coming back at New Mexico and is building a solid program at Utah State. So I wouldn't doubt that at all. That would be a great hire.
I think just obviously his West Coast recruiting nature, I think he would do a great job there. And it's sort of UCLA's, I guess, in terms of recruiting, is maybe not up to the standard of trying to recruit high academic guys like Stanford, but it is still a place where you have to really apply yourself in terms of schooling. So I do
Hmm.
think someone like Bronco, who has the experience at UVA, but also has the experience recruiting on the West Coast, I think that could be someone that UCLA would do a great job with. So, Deuce, who do you have taking on leading the Bruins?
UCLA is the only school I have retaining an interim.
Oh.
I have Tim Skipper, the interim coach at UCLA, staying at UCLA. I think there is going to be some similar power struggles between some boosters and some people involved with the program who think Jerry Neuheisel should end up getting the job. I think Jerry Neuheisel wants that UCLA head coaching job. Obviously, has been the face of that offensive resurgence with Nico Iamaleava there. But I think Tim Skipper has done a very good job there. I think the administration wants a program there. They've tried going out and getting a guy to get wins and eyeballs with Chip Kelly, and that just didn't really work. So I think UCLA has a lot of work to do with their whole football program, whether it be stadium. They have a very nice facility there in Westwood, but I think spending a whole bunch of money on a head coach is something that they're not necessarily up to do right now. That's my main takeaway of it.
Yeah, obviously, Tim taking over for Deshaun Foster, I think, like you're saying, it's going to be interesting to see if UCLA, with the president and the people who are running the show, if they do pull the trigger. I think for almost 40 years now, it seems that UCLA has been talking about getting a stadium on campus. So only time will tell if that's something that they do with, like you're saying, they're going to have to probably find some cost cutting measures somewhere else. I actually did have Tim Skipper for another job that we did not talk about, and that was Colorado State. And the reason I had him for that job was just because of his Mountain West experience. being all across the Mountain West, and I thought that would be a good fit for him. So,
I'm going to touch on Colorado State for a second because that's the job that I wanted to rank really highly, but I just couldn't rank it over power conference teams.
mhm.
Jay Hill, the current coach at Weber State over there in Utah, just
Okay,
across the line,
yeah,
I think he's done a hell of a job at Weber State with that football team. I think this would be a great FCS to Group of Five promotion. Colorado State, I think, is one of the most underrated jobs in the country. You're connected to Texas, you're connected to California, and you're connected to you are a couple states away from the best junior college football in America, whether it's California or Kansas. Colorado State has a also easier than you might think path into the Big 12 in terms of enrollment, in terms of what they do, the type of school that they are. I
yeah.
would not be surprised if they got the right guy at Colorado State. That program goes gangbusters.
Mm, that's a very good pick. All right, Deuce. So now we're heading into the top four coaching destinations, the schools that are looking for their next head coach. That will
The
probably
cream of the crop.
the cream of the crop. That these four schools, they all have conference, college football playoff aspirations, some even national championship aspirations. Let's start with my opinion, the fourth best job. That is Virginia Tech. Um, in my opinion, I think it's for me, it feels like I want to take the obvious pick in terms of who everybody's saying. I don't think Virginia Tech's going to look towards the SEC, and I don't think they're going to look towards anywhere in the Southern Group of Five schools. I think they're just going to go with James Franklin. It seems like the most obvious choice. It seems like the one that everybody's been saying, but it just seems like it makes the most sense in terms of the fact that James Franklin, in terms of the two big places that he has gone to, in terms of Vanderbilt and then Penn State, when after Bill O'Brien and the whole Joe Pa
Yeah.
scandal, they're in a rebuilding phase, and I think that's where he thrives the best. Um, you could name any coach in, the NBA, the Premier League. There are just certain managers and coaches who, or baseball, like any manager who knows how to take teams where there's a lot of dysfunction and a lot of organizational chaos, and then can bring them to a level where there's at least competency. There's at least
Mhm.
competition with the top teams. And I'm not saying that James Franklin will make Virginia Tech a top 10 school. Not saying that they're going to win the ACC from year one, but I do believe in terms of the coaching candidates that are out there who would be interested, I think James Franklin has the best chance to lead them into the right direction. The only other person that I had, and it kind of broke the rule that I was mentioning earlier, but I just don't think it's going to happen, is Shane Beamer. And I
Mhm.
just don't think with just what South Carolina has to offer versus what Virginia Tech has to offer that Shane would leave, unless something disastrous happens for the rest of the season and South Carolina panics and they fire him or they, tell him to get out of there. But I just don't see that happening at this point with South Carolina, and I just think that they're going to go with James Franklin.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech is technically my fifth best job, quote unquote. I do have Arkansas over them because I do think the booster network at Arkansas with the Walton family is massive, and I do think the ceiling at Arkansas is a little bit higher because you are the school. You know, I tell you what about James Franklin. He's a nightmare to recruit against in the DMV. He made Maryland's life hell in Baltimore. And you add the DMV, you add Virginia Beach, you add the Carolinas to that, and he makes everyone's life in the ACC a lot harder because he's a hell of a recruiter in that area. I did technically break the rule.
Okay.
I think Lenora Sellers' development this year has been a significant disappointment in Columbia.
Yeah, I
They
totally
had
agree.
a chance to put away Alabama. Cocktober, as they call it, was almost back on. And I think if there was a situation where Shane Beamer went to South Carolina and said, you know what, they're offering me the Virginia Tech job. I know that's where I'm known and that's where I'm wanted. I think South Carolina would say, okay, great. We will go and try and get someone else. I don't think there would be a lot of bad blood there because I don't think Shane Beamer's a bad coach, and I know South Carolina knows that.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech is a program school ever since the days of Frank Beamer. They're not going to be the school that goes out and tries to just get wins for the sake of wins. Although I am a Virginia fan, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the way Frank Beamer built that program. and coached at Virginia Tech. And I think Shane Beamer would be a nice continuation of that because they've tried other strategies and it just hasn't worked. So I think they're going to try and return to what they know.
Okay. So then, since we'll do that, then let's ask this hypothetical, even though I have no idea, I didn't write anything down. If Shane Beamer goes to South Carolina, then who would you like to see then as the South Carolina head coach if he moves on?
Ooh. So there's a guy that's kind of lurking in the background. And I know it would be weird if he left now. But if you were in a school from Charleston to Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, you got to give Casey Keeler a call. Like
I
you
like
have
that.
to.
I like that.
Or
My
Bob Chesney at James Madison. Those are the two G5 coaches that you have to call right now on the East Coast of the US.
I like both of those. My only concern is I think Casey Keeler is going to Temple simply out of spite for everybody else in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, just because from my experience at this school and the stories that I heard about this man and how much, although he had a lot of success, how much he pissed a lot of people off,
Hmm.
despite being a player there, despite being a coach, despite the last head coach being the last head coach to win the national championship at Delaware FCS
Right.
level, he pissed a lot of people off. And I think him going to Temple right now is a spite move that he's like, you know what? Like, I got banished to Sam Houston State.
Yep.
I made them a national champion. Now I'm
You
going to go
sent
to,
me to the Isle of Elba, and now I am back.
now I'm back in your backyard. And I think he wants to stay in Temple until something significant happens. Uh, it would be crazy if he went to South Carolina because he is on the level of, in my opinion, Kirk Cignetti in terms of lower level dominance in terms of coaching. And he's at near the same age level as Cignetti. So it
Yeah.
would be a very similar in terms of people will be like, who's, Casey Keeler, the same way who maybe are a little bit more casual would be like, who's Kurt Cignetti?
Well, and Casey Keeler is full of nothing but piss and vinegar,
Just
and
just like
he would
Cignetti.
be on the
Yeah.
just like Cignetti.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think South Carolina would love him.
Yeah. So that's an interesting pick. I like that. Okay. Moving on, since you had Virginia Tech at 5, Arkansas 4. So then let's go to the 3 spot. In my opinion, I would say number 3 is Florida. Do
Okay,
you do you agree with that, or did you have Penn State as 3?
I floored it to Penn State 3.
Okay, let's talk about Penn State then.
Yes.
This is the pick that I think I went the most bold with in terms of who they should hire. I have been bullish on this guy since his days at Assumption in Salve, Regina, and it's Bob Chesney. The man you mentioned earlier would be a great call for South Carolina. This man, you want to talk about, like we were just talking about earlier about Signetti winning. This man has
Yes.
won at every single level that he has been at. When he was at Holy Cross, I believe the 8 years that he was there, or the 7 years that he was there, he won the Patriot League every single year in dominant fashion and went to the FCS playoffs every single year. And now being at James Madison, following up Kurt Signetti's dominance at JMU for the 3 or 4 years that he was there, he's done just the same thing and picked up where they've left off, despite how much change has happened with the head coaching and the style that both guys play. I
Hmm.
think he would do an incredible job. I believe Bob Chesney is from Pennsylvania, so I think,
Yes.
in terms of boosters of like the guy that they want, I think it would just make sense of bringing somebody like that to the program. Penn State is a school where the people that get it. And it is very much the fact that it's a lot like Ohio State, where like they're so like nothing else obviously in the state matters more in that part of the in the
Oh,
state and in the country
absolutely.
than Penn State football. I
Yes.
mean, the influence reaches goes from Pittsburgh to New York City. And
Yep.
it goes all the way through North Jersey, through the East, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, all the way over to Pittsburgh, and all the way up into Buffalo, even. Like, there's so much
Yes.
pride and passion for Penn State. And we got a chance to see that when we were in high school. We got to go visit when they were
It's
at the Fire
legit.
Game.
It's
Yeah.
real.
And whatever your feelings may be about Penn State, you can't deny that people show up and are passionate about it. So
Yes.
I think Bob Chesney would be someone that if Penn State wants to make a bold move and not worry about the other big names that are out right now, I think Bob Chesney would be the perfect guy to lead this program into immediate winning contention.
Yes. Now, I think under normal circumstances, if Penn State had had repeated losing seasons and it just didn't seem like it was working, then Bob Chesney would be the guy. The reason I have Penn State at three is I think it's the most toxic situation in all of college football right now. I think if you are a coach at the G5 level, you have to treat moving up to these Power Five jobs a lot like a governor or senator choosing when to run for president. You have to look for favorable conditions where you're going to be uplifted and you're going to be elevated and you're going to be supported. And the success that you have is going to be valued. We've seen very clearly that 10 wins is not good enough for Penn State.
Yeah.
It's just not good enough for those. And say what you will about that as an expectation. I think it's ridiculous to fire a coach for winning 10 games a year. I think you're on crack if you think that you can just have Nick Saban 2.0. Like, God only makes so many of those.
Yeah, everybody in the social media and the sports media has talked about it, but literally a month ago, these guys were in top five conversations, and last year were the game I was at were a play away in overtime to winning the Big Ten championship, and then when they went to the playoffs, almost making it as well. So I mean, the fact that it's flipped so much in the span of a month is insane. Like you're saying, just the expectations at a place like that is so high.
Right. If Bob Chesney goes to Virginia Tech and they win 4 games next year and they're incredibly tough to play and they lose like 6 1-score games, he will be incredibly appreciated because he's playing tough competitive football. At Penn State, that's not going to be good enough. They are expecting someone who's going to come in and who's going to win and win quickly. And so that's why I have, and I've been wrestling with this for a while. I have Eli Drinkowitz going to Penn State.
Okay, so tell us why then Eli Drinkowitz makes the move from Missouri and the SEC and would go to Penn State in the Big Ten. What do you see there in terms of obviously you're talking about expectations and winning. He's done an incredible job in terms of Missouri being a title contending SEC championship bubble team that is in the conversations the past 2 years now at least. Where
Yep.
do you see him and how do you see him, making that Penn State, one of the top teams again?
I think because Marcus Freeman and Urban Meyer will tell them no.
Right. That's what
Nick's
I said. Like I just yeah, I think Urban Meyer
Miss
will say
Miss
no.
Terry will tell Penn State no.
Yeah, John Gruden will
And
say no.
they are in such a desire to get back to winning football that they are going to look around and they're going to make someone an offer that they can't refuse. And I think, and in defense of Eli, everywhere he's gone as a head coach, he's been highly successful. 12 in one season at App State, a ton of success at Missouri, but there are a lot of 10-win teams in the SEC. And I think Drinkwitz is a coach who wants to coach to that highest level. And no disrespect to Colmo, but like Penn State is an upgrade against Missouri. Like it just
I
is
would
what it is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I
And
just think if you thrive at Penn State, you're right now you would be, number 4 or 5, probably maybe even number 3 in terms of the top teams in the conference with now
Mhm.
Indiana, which is crazy to even say that Indiana's top Big Ten football team,
Right.
Ohio State and Oregon. And obviously those being the 3 top teams right now in the conference. Michigan has obviously fallen a bit of the wayside out of that. And so Penn State is now looking to try to obviously beat Indiana and take them out and then compete with Oregon and Ohio State every single year.
I gave some thought to Will Stein, but I
Okay.
think they're looking for a head coach.
Yeah, I agree.
That I think Will Stein is probably going to take a great job the next cycle.
Okay.
So that was the other guy that I gave some thought to.
Okay. So then now let's go to your number 2 school, which would be the University of Florida. I scribbled like 5 different names, and each time I was frustrated. So I'll tell you some of the names that I had that I don't think I thought about for a second, and then they're not. So the first name that I had was Brent Key, the Georgia Tech head coach. I really like it. I don't know how much though, as a former player at Georgia Tech, the amount of money he would have to be offered, in my opinion, to move to Florida, I think would have to be astronomical.
Yes.
Um, he's has a great situation right now at Georgia Tech where he could potentially be he's trying to compete for an ACC championship right now.
I think he's the coach of the year right now.
So there you go. So it's one of those things where it'd be really hard for him to make that decision to move. Uh,
Yeah.
I had Alex Golish as the other person to go to Florida. I don't think that Florida maybe will hire a group of five head coach. I think they're trying to find someone with star recognition.
Yeah.
However, the one name that I had instead that breaks that rule, and I do think that they will take the chance because I think that they are actually going to miss all the top candidates, and I think they're going to be late, and
Ooh.
they're going to have to pick somebody else up. I think it's going to be John Summerall, the Tulane head coach.
I like that.
And the only reason I think is I think Lane Kiffin is going to say no. I think he's going to stay at Ole Miss. I think Urban Meyer is going to say no. I think Ed Orgeron's going to say no. I think Nick Saban's going to be say no. So then you're at a point where then, you
Right.
know, some of these other top names that we talked about, they're going to get picked up. And I think, but it's still a good pickup. And I still think John
Yeah.
Summerall is going to, if he goes to Florida, would do a great job there. So they may be disappointed with the fact that they're not taking a guy who's at a Power Five program, but I do think at Tulane he's done an excellent job and he's had sustained success there for the past few years. And so I think he'll do a great job if he goes to Florida. Deuce, who do you have?
I didn't even think to connect Edo and Florida, and now the more I think about it, the more I kind of like it. I'm kind of intrigued by that. I think right behind Penn State, Florida is right up there with the environment being very toxic at the time they fired their head coach. They want to win football games.
Yep.
I think Florida State's one, like Penn State does want a program.
Yeah.
Florida State wants to win some football games, and that's why I think they are not going to let Lane Kiffin say no. I think Lane is going to end up some way, shape, or form there. I don't love that because I think there there used to be a tier even within the SEC, like you could only do so much at Ole Miss before you hit the ceiling.
Yeah.
But I don't think that ceiling is as real anymore. But I do think with obviously Monty being a Tampa Bay guy, the Tampa to his other child
Yeah. Yeah.
over in Tampa. Gainesville is not a far drive from Tampa in the grand scheme of things. I think that he would be appreciated for his offensive skills and his ability to score points over there in Gainesville, just like he has in Oxford. And if you can't beat him, hire him. And I think that Lane Kiffin will say no, and the figure will continue to climb and climb and climb, and they will be all in on the visor.
I like that, and the more you're talking about it, that makes a lot of sense. Some of the other names that I thought were pretty funny that Florida fans were saying all over the message board that they're going to sign. Dan Lanning and Marcus Freeman. I think there's 0% chance that either of those guys would leave the situations that they're at now to go to Florida.
Both of those coaches are on statue trajectory at their
Yeah.
schools. Like,
Yeah. And then same thing, in my opinion, they also had Kenny Dillingham, which I think could maybe possibly happen, but I just think he loves it too much at Arizona State. Mike McDaniel, if he gets fired from the Dolphins just because he's a bro and he's got the he's got the floods and
oh God.
the tan Jordans or whatever. So and I don't think that's going to happen, but I do like the idea. If Lane Kiffin goes, I think that's the only way it happens where you'll hear reports that he turned it down and then like old Miss fans are so excited and then like 24 hours later you'll see on the trackers private jet from Oxford, Mississippi to Gainesville, Florida.
And Lane has changed a lot in his
Yeah.
middle age,
Yeah.
but sometimes old habits die hard. It's
And
just,
yeah, and again, you talk about like the craziest moments with coaching changes and coaching candidates. You can't talk about a lot of them without Lane Kiffin and some of the stuff that he's pulled off with all the different
yeah.
places that he's done. So now we go to the last school. I think it's obviously everybody knows who this is. This is LSU.
Yep.
I think everybody kind of when they hired Brian Kelly was a little bit confused. They understand it on paper why you would get somebody who had success at a place like Notre Dame, but then he goes to the basketball arena and all of a sudden develop the Cajun accent and looks like tried to sound like he was from Swamp People or whatever, and it just didn't pull off the way he thought it would.
Boosie Brian Kelly did not work out.
Right. He didn't want to get the Boosie fade. He didn't want to, do buy in. He didn't get the Raising Canes enough. So you think, okay, he's had such a toxic year with them, despite the fact that he's had so many talented people play for him. LSU with Jane Daniels and guys like Malik Neighbors and those people, and then yet they still haven't found a way to, yeah, they won the SEC West division in 2022, but just haven't been able to get over that hump in defeating the teams like Alabama and Georgia, which is another place, like you're saying, the last three coaches at LSU have won national champions
Right.
with Coach O, Les Miles, and Nick Saban.
Yeah.
So I think again, just like Florida, I think LSU is going to call two of those three guys. I think they're going to call Coach O, and I think they're going to call Coach Saban, and I also think they'll call Urban Meyer, and I think all three again will say no, like I've been saying this whole time. But Deuce, tell me before I say my pick, I want to hear who do you have for your LSU head coach?
So, like you were saying, I think LSU is clear cut. If you don't have it in your top five jobs in all of college football, you're not watching the sport well enough.
Yeah.
Baton Rouge, one of the best college football towns, and weirdly enough, they pack in 50,000 people for Southern too. So it's like this is the most football crazed town in America per capita, probably.
Yeah.
And when LSU was good, there aren't many other places like it.
I'd
Like,
I'd say it's probably the best college atmosphere, and it's probably a place I want to cross off the bucket list and into going to.
man, Death Valley, like when you're the school in the state, all love to the Green Wave, but like that's New Orleans' school, Louisiana
Definitely.
is the Tigers. And the guy I have is who I think is the best program builder this year. It's a guy who you would have to pay a lot to get to leave the current situation they're in right now,
Oh.
but the ceiling at LSU is so much higher than any job in that conference, which is crazy to say because Florida State's in that conference and Miami's in that conference. But if there's anyone I trust that LSU job with, it's Brent Key.
Oh, you faked me out there. I thought you were about to say Dabo Sweeney.
No,
You're you're
no.
talking about program builder and like not many other jobs. I was getting pumped up for Dabo Sweeney. Okay.
Dabo, I think, is going out like Tommy
I think he's done.
Tuberville was supposed to. He's going out of Clemson in a pine box, I think.
Okay. Okay.
But
So Brent Key, talk to us about that.
Brent Key has done an incredible job at Georgia Tech. It's very hard to follow up a head coach that you were on the staff of, obviously being Jeff Collins' interim there. Not only managed to win over the university, win over the administration, he has caused a football renaissance in Atlanta with the Yellow Jackets. He's done an incredible job with Haynes King. Georgia Tech, like we were saying with some of these other schools like Stanford and UCLA, it's not easy to get kids into Georgia Tech, and he's managed to turn out a tough, physical football team that goes in every single week and wins football games.
Hmm.
And you hand a coach like that Louisiana athletes and Gulf Coast athletes from the Panhandle over to East Texas, man, look out. I think if you could Brent Key doing that kind of job, and he kind of fits what LSU has tried to do. Whether it was Coach O, who obviously who was elevated onto that staff, came from a couple other jobs, including Ole Miss, Nick Saban coming down from Michigan State, Les Miles getting elevated. They haven't gone out and gotten another Power Five or marquee job coach. They've gone through and got coaches from schools that are perceived as lower on the status totem pole, and they found the right guys that understand that program. I think Brent Key will get an offer he can't refuse, and I think he'll do a hell of a job at LSU.
I like that. That's a good pitch. I kind of looked at this job a little bit differently. I think although LSU, in my opinion, is going to be the school that make the best pitch to any coach that's on the market right now in terms of
Hmm.
who's available, it's not to say that LSU right now, in terms of their directive and who's making the decisions, there's a lot of people involved right now who all have their own different agendas and all have their own different, well, I like this guy, I like this guy. I think it's going to be very hard to convince, Todd Graves and, the governor of Louisiana,
Jeff
some of these
Landry.
people,
This
all
ain't
these,
the days of Huey Long where Huey got everything in line
it's
and got
it's
everyone on the same page.
it's going to be hard to convince every single person who is involved in the money-making decisions and the athletic decisions to convince one single person is the job man for the job. I do think there is somebody who, although is not the front runner, I do think fans would be the most excited about just because of what he represents to the university. And when you look back at the 2019 LSU team, obviously everybody remembers how historic the offense was and how dominant the offense was and
Oh.
how I think they said I don't think it was every starter, but I think it was almost every starter on offense and defense got drafted to the NFL that year. And none more was more impressive than the receiving room and the quarterback. And the man who was in charge of that rooms and those decision makings in terms of the pass game was none other than offensive coordinator Joe Brady.
I
Although he
don't
was only
I
there
don't
for,
dislike that. I like
al-
that.
although he was only there for 1 year, and although he's not, what people expect of like he went to William and Mary, like he's not someone that you would have complete, you know, grassroots, homestaying people from LSU. I believe he
Yeah.
is someone that could unify the entire structure and apparatus that is LSU football
Yep.
just because of how much success in the 1 year that he was there, bringing them that national championship.
Yes.
I think he would know, like you were talking about the athletes that are in Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. I think there's somebody like him who he can literally just point at the two best receivers, well, three best receivers, or three of the best receivers in the NFL right now, and T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, and say,
Yes.
I did it with those guys. I turned those guys into NFL superstars. Who else in the SEC can say that about their receiving core? Because
Hmm.
Nick Saban's gone and he's not coaching anymore. So there's nobody else who's done it with the receiver group and the skill group just as a whole. And Joe Brady can take that credit and can run with it as his recruiting sales pitch.
Yeah.
I think that would be such an exciting move. The only thing that hurts is that we see a lot from time to time coaches who it's a lot easier from a coach, once they go from college to NFL than it is NFL to college,
Yes.
just because you get so used to the schedule and the routine that you have there, it's a night and day difference.
Yeah.
You'll have to find during the vetting process, they're going to have to find out if would he rather stay with Josh Allen and the Bills and try to compete for a Super Bowl every year, or be in LSU and recruit and then try to win a national championship every year.
There are some people who are connecting him to Penn State too because of the Pagula connection. But Joe Brady at LSU excites me a lot more than Joe Brady at Penn State because,
Yeah.
I do think that it is important they get someone who, if not understands, at least respects and values what Death Valley and LSU represents. There are a whole lot of traditions at that school that are very important and ways you play football. And, I think Key and Brady both understand what LSU football should be, what it looks like at its best. That makes a ton of sense to me.
Okay. So good. I'm glad I like both of our choices with this with the LSU head coach. I think if they went with either guys, I don't think they would have any problems. I think both would be extremely successful at
Yeah.
LSU. Um, well, Deuce, I appreciate you coming on. This was an awesome video to do. Super excited. Everybody, please, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, go follow Deuce on all social medias. He has two really good channels. For those who are really interested in baseball and the business side and front office side of the game, please go to Defer to the Game. Same, I believe if I'm correct, same handle on all those pages on all the
Yep.
different social medias. Same thing with the 434 Defense podcast. He's been doing a great job on YouTube. I'm also appearing in a lot of those episodes where we
Yes.
recap a lot of the UVA games, give our predictions for the UVA games as the season's been rolling along, as the University of Virginia is having a very historic season right now. So, Deuce, any last words, anything to add as we head out of here?
James, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's always a pleasure. It's always nice talking to you about football and everything like that, man. Go Hoos, go Hens, go Bulldogs, all that.
Absolutely. So, thank you guys, and we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.